Dobbs did for us was returned the decision regarding the right to life to the people. And so now it's a matter of the evangelization of hearts, the changing of hearts, the conversion of hearts, to understand that human life is sacred and needs to be protected in law, for the sake not only of the child who will be born, but for the sake of all of us. Because this cannot be the story of the American people. We are greater than this. And there are very real issues around abortion that need to be addressed: the dignity of women, the place of women in society, of course. But we can address all of those while protecting the life of all.
All right, well, for Pete's sake, we're back with our podcast here in Rome. I'm your host, Charlotte Twetton, and I'm joined today by Mother Agnes. She's one of the founding sisters of the Sisters for Life. She was one of the first to answer the call of Cardinal O'Connor to protect and uphold the dignity of all lives around the world. Mother, we're so happy to have you on the podcast.
So delighted to be here.
Wonderful.
To be with you, Charlotte, here in Rome.
Wonderful. And on such a beautiful day, it was miraculously nice outside.
Gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
Yes.
I mean, right in the middle of the winter, and we
Yes.
got a beautiful day today, so I think it's a good sign.
I do too. Spring has come.
It has.
To Rome.
It has. And then just to begin, I wanted to talk, the Sisters of Life is a relatively new order, founded in 1991.
So we're just about, what does it make us? 35 years old.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Yeah,
and then
almost.
tell me, how did you come to know about the call for the order, and how did you come across this unique ministry?
Yes. Well, it all goes back to our founder, Cardinal O'Connor, who was a wonderful churchman. Sister Antoniana, whom I live with, was telling me of a story just this morning. She opened the door of our house, and a priest was there to visit some other priests who were in the rectory there. And he came from Cameroon, and when heard that Cardinal O'Connor was the founder of our community, he said, "Oh, he was a great man." Now, how does he know that? But the world knows about him in ways that we don't even recognize that the world knows. So our lives are founded upon the grace he received. And it was a grace he received, Charlotte, in Dachau. Which is so unusual, really. He was making a retreat there. The Carmelites at that time, he was a Navy chaplain, eventually chief of chaplains for the Navy, and making his annual retreat and walking about the grounds in Dachau. And I often think of him because you could see him doing this, and in other places at other times, walking with a rosary in his hands. And he tells a story of when he approached the crematorium, and as he walked through the room of the showers, and then came to the semi-circular red brick ovens, he would say. And he said, "I put my hands," and it becomes a mystical recounting. "I put my hands in the semicircular red brick ovens and could feel the intermingled ashes of man, woman, and child, of rabbi, priest, and minister. And his soul," he said, "cried out to God. How could man do this to man?" And with that, there seems in his telling and what he doesn't tell, a tremendous and powerful grace impressed upon his soul. He would preach from that day forward on the dignity and sacredness of every human person from that day until his death. And part of that was the founding of the Sisters of Life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Amazing.
I mean, amazing.
Amazing. Because he first allied himself with all of the pro-life leaders and all of the activities and movement within the pro-life community, both in our country and beyond. But then, years in, and realizing they hadn't really changed the culture. He was praying one day with Mark 9, where our Lord descends from Mount Tabor. The disciples have just been out on their first missionary journey. They've returned. A father has asked for the healing of his son because they have witnessed the apostles healing and curing, and they could not heal this child. And our Lord does. And later, when they have gathered in a room by themselves at the end of the day, the apostles ask our Lord, and they said, why could we not heal this child? And he said, this is a demon that can only be cast out by prayer and fasting. And with that, he somehow recognized what the movement needed now was those who would be dedicated spiritually to a rebuttal to the culture of death and to really raising up a culture of life, that what was needed was prayer. For this was a demon, it was not a human reason that they had not been successful. Wow. I know.
So the Sisters of Life was that answer to that call to prayer.
The Sisters of Life were the answer to that. Wow. Eventually, yeah.
So the focus, I know your ministry is on the dignity and the protection of, human life. But is prayer really at the center of that?
Prayer is, he raised us up as a contemplative apostolic community. Mm-hmm. And so what that means is that we pray together in common approximately 4.5 to 5 hours a day. So we pray all the liturgy of the hours with the exception of 2 small hours, the mid-morning and mid-afternoon. And we pray a Eucharistic holy hour, meditation in the morning, Mass. It's a beautiful life of prayer, honestly. And that fuels our work. That gives us the strength and the courage, the desire and the joy in fulfilling and bringing the message of the dignity of the human person to anyone.
Wow.
We meet.
So then, wow, how amazing and how wonderful the work you all do. And we're so grateful, I know, for all that you do to combat, this massive issue. And the prayers you guys have, I know, change the culture that we live in. Mm-hmm. But could you talk a little about your own personal experience coming to know the Sisters of Life and the calling that was happening?
Mm-hmm. I'd be happy to in a synopsis. But what I should say also, Charlotte, is that every religious sister and every calling, this is a call that each participates in, because it's a call to love. The call to religious consecration is the call to give all of one's love to someone, So how did it happen to me? I would say, I'll give you just 3 or 4 little moments. The first was a retreat I was making. When I realized it turned my world upside down, actually. I thought that I needed to plan my life and I would give all the good things to God. So I was. And yet that wasn't yet a life. I realized that. But I also realized that it wasn't something that I could create or produce. And I was on retreat and realized that what God was asking for was he wanted me to give all of my life to him. And he would take care of the rest. So that was a very defining moment in prayer and silence. About 6 months later, I was in St. Patrick's Cathedral. We had been witnessing with friends at an abortion clinic that was on 29th Street, which had subsequently closed. But a lot of friends would be there on a Saturday morning, and I was with them. And one of them shared with me that the Cardinal was going to preach that evening at St. Patrick's. So we all made our way there, and he spoke of the fact that he was founding a community, a contemplative apostolic community that would be dedicated to the sense of the sacredness, advancing a sense of the sacredness of human life in all of society. And it was captivating to hear of a contemplative apostolic community. And that was followed by an invitation to be on a retreat that he hosted, a discernment retreat. And he would host these twice a year for many years, for nearly 9 years. And I remember sitting there at dinner one night, and I made sure I was sitting very far away from him so I could simply just enjoy and listen. And as I was sitting there, the thought that came to me that was profound, actually profoundly impactful, was that this is an apostle of Jesus Christ. And I just had some sense of the depth of his spirit and of his closeness to God. And I think it were those 3 moments that certainly participated in the fact that I would eventually enter.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
When you realize that someone's really doing the ministry of Christ in that moment, do you go, okay, next step immediately, or do you go, let me stay in the moment? How do you juggle that when you're going, wow, I have something unique here? Do you remember what your first thought was after that?
Yeah. That's a wonderful question. In the moment, I wasn't convicted that I would take action immediately because I knew God could move and that he would now have to confirm that. And I remember I left that retreat begging the Cardinal to pray for me. I said, pray for me because I need to know if this is what God is asking. And that grace would come. That grace would come about 3 weeks later. I remember I woke up one morning. It was April 8th, so I thought nothing of it. It was after Easter, and I somehow knew that I would enter. And it was just some kind of a confirming grace, and would find out later that day that it was the solemnity of the Annunciation, and as if to confirm again for me that this was of God.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And then you join, is there any surprises once you join, as you're beginning the very early stages of a new order is, I imagine, rather complex. It's probably a unique experience that not everyone gets to be able to experience in their life.
Well, only those who enter. But I would say yes, nearly everything was a total surprise to me. I mean, everything from what you ate in the morning to how you lived together as a group of women, how you kept house. I mean, small things like this and very big things, like how did we understand together what we were called to, the surprises never ended. He was a founder, and I think that was a profound awareness that came to me of the depth of the spirit of this, because he was a founder but would not live with us because he was the Cardinal Archbishop of New York. He was an inordinately busy man because he was capable of so much. He served the church not only in New York but here in Rome with great eagerness and great energy, So we wouldn't see him every day. And we're to live the charism he received. And so it was a great leap of faith, to live within a grace that now we participated in, but that he knew from God intimately. And he would be extraordinarily generous. Every time he flew into New York at Kennedy Airport, he'd come by and stop in the Bronx at the convent to be with us. He made himself present to us personally, himself present to us. We could write him at will. He would be with us on Sundays after his preaching in the cathedral. Then he'd invite us back for a coffee with his friends so that we could just get to know the person that God used as his instrument in raising up a charism for the church.
Yeah, absolutely. So amazing. What a unique time. And then obviously you guys have grown so much since then. You've entered in several different cities, and you've expanded across the East Coast and now Canada as well, Toronto, I believe. Yes. Okay, so talk to me about seeing, the groundwork to this, larger organization. Mm-hmm. What was that sort of like? And did you guys think that it would, expand as quickly as it did, or?
You know, Charlotte, I think it's not unlike marriage. You just don't know. You have no idea. I don't think any of us had an idea of what it would become like, what it would look like in the future. And we're very occupied, honestly, with living it in the moment, trusting and knowing ourselves. You know, I used to say, oh, we are a motley crew. You know, it just was like, how is God going to work with this? You know?
Right.
And he does. He works with the most amazing circumstances and people and, you know, with all our weaknesses and the strengths and the gifts he's given us, you know, but the weaknesses are your prize because it is then that you can see him so vividly, you know. So I would say, I don't think we had a roadmap. The Cardinal would tell us that this was a charism and a community that would be for the universal church. And in that, he meant we would one day be on all 5 continents.
Right.
We would be serving the church everywhere.
Yeah.
We were universal. There was a need. And our work was simply to live it well in its infancy, you know?
Beautiful.
Which was lovely.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a beautiful analogy it really is like that. Oh my goodness. How amazing. And then, so can you talk to me about, as this is growing, okay, we're just going to have faith. We're going to take that leap of faith.
Right.
Any areas where you didn't think you would really need to focus? Any areas where you didn't, most people wouldn't think that's an area where there's a lack of dignity of human life? Were there any new areas? Because I think when we think of, okay, there are pretty obvious areas where life is being, you know, honestly dishonored in many ways, you know, abortion and euthanasia and all these areas. Was there any that you go, okay, this is an area where life is not being protected and not being upheld that you didn't see coming?
Oh, I would say yes, Charlotte, actually. Obviously, at that time, there was 1.4 million and more abortions a year just in our own nation. It was a time of devastating and sort of unthinking ways of life. So we knew that was the first. We were serving, even from postulancy on, we were serving young women. You know, it was wonderful. But in a small number at that time. And then it was only about 3 years later when we were opening our second convent, the new addition to our life, that we had a group of women, wonderful women, who came to us, and every Saturday we would have a volunteer day, and we would paint another room, and we'd clean more windows or whatever. And these women had been with us for most of 6 months, and it was spring. And at the end of one day, one of the women came to me who was part of this prayer group that had volunteered, and she said, do you think you'd have time to speak with us? And I said, oh, sure. So we sat down afterwards, myself and maybe another sister or two, and we sat down, and I had no idea what they wanted to talk about. And they introduced themselves to me. They were devout, practicing Catholics, all married with families. They were beautiful, beautiful women of God. And they said, we think you can help us because we have suffered. We have suffered the loss of a child to abortion. And we have prayed through the years, but we think you can help us. And that was the first really significant expansion to our ministry, was to those who have suffered. And it has been such a beautiful, redemptive ministry. These women became our first partners in the mission, and they helped us design the program. What would be helpful, and how should we organize a day of prayer and healing, we would call it, and how we would organize retreats. And they were our colleagues in this. Beautiful, beautiful ministry. It's the most powerful ministry where I have seen the work, the tender heart of Jesus. He reveals his sacred heart there in ways I have never seen. And he is most tender. and comes to them with such great mercy. We hosted days of prayer and healing, and now it's a flourishing ministry that serves hundreds, literally hundreds and hundreds of women each year.
Wow.
Many now, we host the same retreats that are exclusively in Spanish, led by our sisters, priests who work with our sisters very closely and understand the heart of a woman, and are able to work very effectively in confession, in the sacrament of reconciliation. And you witness these women arrive on Friday, and it is Good Friday. It is the day when they suffer the most. They finally have summoned the courage to take a step forward. And in summoning that courage, they walk through the days. And when they leave on Sunday, you have lived the Paschal mystery at our beautiful retreat house, which has like a park-like lawn in front of it. I looked out the window, or one of our sisters looked out the window, she told me, looked out the window as we were headed to Mass, and she was looking out the window, and she sees this woman, who's not young, doing somersaults across our lawn on her way to Mass. And it really epitomizes what we experience when they do leave us that day. They have finally left behind the burden that burdened them. And some carry it for 2 years, some for 20, some for a lifetime, and they're in their 70s. And they want, finally, to be assured that they are forgiven and that they have the capacity to forgive others.
Amazing.
It is amazing. It truly
what
is.
A gift.
Yes.
What a gift.
And the ministry is a gift beyond gifts. Yeah.
Wow. So then the ministry to not just what's obvious when it comes to issues of dignity of life,
Right.
but the ministry that people probably aren't thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those secret ministries, maybe. You know, do you think your founder ever knew that this would develop into a larger area, or were you just always solidified in, okay, we have one for specific area, let's make sure we stay to that?
Yes. Well, we thought we understood the greatest need,
Mm-hmm.
which was the unborn child. But he would always speak of picking up the pieces, lest they be lost, quoting the scriptures, in the lives of women who he said, if they have a scintilla of faith, they will suffer after having made a rash decision, and often a hurried, fear-based decision. They will suffer greatly. And he had a great heart for these women and wished that they have a place where they could come to bring their burdens. Yes.
Wow, amazing. And so the ministry, I always think, you know, there's such a story that pro-life ministry is anti-women. And I have found it to be the exact opposite. And I know you all do minister to women as well and care deeply for them.
Yes.
What do you say to people when they say that to you? Have you ever come into those arguments, and do you just point to the work?
Yes, you just point to the work, because women come to us. We don't go find them. They find us. They're coming voluntarily. Mm-hmm. They're in our ministries for those who are pregnant, in their own experience, unexpectedly, you know. They feel as if their whole life has been lost, possibly. And their question to themselves often is, it either is my life or the life of the child. And it's not that, that's not the dramatic question. It feels that way because the culture positions a woman to think that way by its rhetoric, by its way of thinking of women. But when they come to us, we simply listen to their hearts. And we wait and listen, listening so that they can also hear themselves, and in hearing themselves, gather the strength that is theirs to live and to make the most loving choice, which they can live with, you know, for the rest of their lives. And most of the women the great majority of the women. In days before social media, we had over 90% of the women who would come to us considering abortion at the moment when they're also deliberating as to whether that is the alternative. More than 90% would choose to bring their child to birth. Wow. And even to this day, it's in the 70s or 80s, I believe. And it's a great witness to the nature of the heart of a woman, that the heart of a woman has space for others. And she simply needs to be confirmed and to actually experience within herself her deepest desires, not that which may be efficient or superficial or a momentary passing desire.
Yeah, but to feel safe as well, to have those desires.
Exactly.
I think I find, the fear is so powerful.
Overwhelming.
It's terrifying. And when everyone around you participates in the fear,
that's right.
You can't participate in that feminine desire. You can't open that heart when you're not feeling protected or loved. Right. What a beautiful ministry to be able to provide an environment, just to say you are safe. You're with us.
Yes.
Talk to us. We'll be with you.
Yes. Wow. Yes.
Amazing.
And she knows that we will be with her regardless of the outcome.
Yes.
And that she will come back another day if it is the outcome we hope is not the one that she chooses.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Has there been any particular story in your ministry that you remember as like, that holds near in my heart? That's a moment that I was so surprised, or perhaps it just touched you in a way.
I remember a young couple who came to us because they had somehow believed that they could justify in their own minds the thought of terminating the child's life. And they came to talk with us, referred by a priest. They went to a priest to be blessed, honestly, before they made a tragic decision. And he said to them, you really need to think about this, and encouraged them to come and speak with us. They came to us and were able to walk away from a conversation that could go on through most of the afternoon. They were able to walk away absolutely confirmed in a different direction and wanting to live with that thought for a time. And they did. It's wondrous to see the work of grace in a soul and how God approaches one and strengthens one who seeks his help. God allows, because they are so dramatic and so amazing, honestly. One was of a woman who lived with us, and her name was Raquel. And Raquel was a wonderful, strong-willed, purposeful young woman. And she had no trouble telling us that she was pro-choice, but that she was going to have her child, but she certainly would never stand in the way of another. And so we knew Raquel, and we loved her, and life went on. And one day she went to meet her OBGYN, who had an office in a hospital building. And when she got to the office, it's New York, and so you have to take elevators to most any place you're going. And she hopped on the elevator, and there was another woman on the elevator. And she looked at her, and she said, I'm pregnant. And the other woman said, I'm pregnant too, but I'm going to have an abortion. And she said, she took the woman's hand and she put it on her belly. And as she did, her little child kicked. And she said, yes, I'm having a boy. And he's going to be strong. He's going to be a linebacker one day. And she said, I'm having an abortion. And Raquel, being Raquel, she said, no, you're not. She said, "You're not going to have an abortion. You're going to have a little girl, because you're going to tell them that you met a wonderful woman on the elevator one day, and you're going to dress them up and put pigtails in their hair and pretty pink bows." She took her down off the elevator, helped her make an appointment with her OBGYN, and never saw her again.
Oh my
That was the
goodness.
beginning and the end of their relationship, she thought. And another day, when she was in the city, she ran into
No.
this woman
Really?
who was pushing a stroller 2 years later with two little girls,
No.
Raquel and Jasmine, who were all dressed up in pink
Oh my gosh.
with bows
Oh
in their
my
hair.
gosh.
Yes. And she said, "Raquel, I know you." And she said, "I could never forget you.
Yeah.
I love you. I love you. I never could forget you." And she is pushing a stroller with two little girls. And she looks at the children, and the young mother says to her, "And this one is Raquel, and the other Jasmine." She had left her with the words, "By the way, my middle name is Jasmine," when she had met her the first time.
Oh my goodness. So she
Yeah.
named both girls after her.
After her.
Oh, how amazing.
It's amazing.
It's so amazing.
So amazing.
What an amazing testimony. And I'm sure that's just one of the
Yes.
thousands of stories you
Exactly.
have.
Exactly.
But it's just the constant testimony of what happens when you open the door to grace.
Yes, yes.
Because Raquel was pro-choice,
She was.
but she,
But she was carrying her child. I think she was pro-choice, thinking that she would never want to force or coerce, which the pro-life movement has never been about. But I think that's how others may think of it.
yeah,
And in thinking of it, she was pro-choice in that she would never force a woman or coerce a woman. Well, of course. Who would?
Yeah.
Who could?
Yeah.
Not even God,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is interesting. I wonder
Yeah.
if that's how people perceive
I think so.
the ministry of pro-life,
Mm-hmm.
which has so never been my experience. I find the March for Life actually unique in this.
Yes.
Is many marches, when you go to, there's a quite
Yes.
intense atmosphere
That's right.
and a rather strong and perhaps even antagonistic at times atmosphere.
Mm.
And I have never found that in the March for Life.
No.
The life ministry is unique in its prayer,
That's right.
and it gives a tone,
Yes.
I think, of grace, if we're being honest, to everything that they do.
That's right.
And I mean, the March for Life this
Right.
year, huge, massive.
Yeah.
I mean, amazing. Were you there?
No, I was here in Rome, but we were
Right.
watching it. You can be sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it
amazing.
looked huge,
Yeah.
and that was my surprise.
Yeah.
Was like, oh my goodness, this is huge.
Even
This is huge.
after the
After
overturn.
Dobbs.
I mean, have you noticed anything changing in the pro-life movement after the overturning of Roe v. Wade?
Yes, I think that they've had to retool, they've had to regroup, they've had to refocus, and I think, slowly but surely are doing a good job of that. It's a statewide job now. Now we have to convince our families, our neighbors, our communities, the women that we know. We have to, one heart at a time, bring the message, because now what Dobbs did for us was returned the decision regarding the right to life to the people.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's a matter of the evangelization of hearts, the changing of hearts, the conversion of hearts, to understand that human life is sacred and needs to be protected in law,
Yeah, absolutely.
for the sake not only of the child who will be born, but for the sake of all of us. Because this cannot be the story of the American people. We are greater than this. And there are very real issues around abortion that need to be addressed: the dignity of women, the place of women in society, of course. But we can address all of those while protecting the life of all.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the beginning of life and at the end of life.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
And that's such an interesting thing. I mean, I think living here in Rome, what I've noticed, talking about America,
Mm-hmm.
the pro-life movement is huge in America.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found so interesting is it's really a leader in the
Mm-hmm.
world of pro-life movements. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
America, even Roe v. Wade, the next year, there was the first march. It
Right.
was an immediate response,
That's right.
which is a very American mentality. But I have found it so interesting living
Yeah.
here in Europe. I don't find as many pro-life movements.
Right.
Or if I do, they're a lot smaller than what I'm used to
Mm-hmm.
experiencing. And maybe that's just been my experience. I know there was the pro-life march in Paris, which was so beautiful to see, huge numbers, but that's perhaps grown much slower
Right.
than what we've seen in America. Do you have any insight as to why that might be, given the cultural Catholicism of Europe? You would maybe think that it wouldn't be that way.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know, but I think we can posit some possibilities. Okay. I would say, if you look at American history, we were born out of a revolution. That is our history. We revolted against the tyranny of other governance, And Americans have it in their DNA to stand up for rights that they perceive to be important. And that would not be the culture, I think, of Europe.
Right.
And I think it's harder for them to find a forum and to find a presence that is both committed and convicting, in which they can speak, and that the minds of the people can be heard. So I am very pleased to see it growing, and I agree. It has grown more slowly. I think that in our nation, it has grown more quickly because it's such a heinous thing that innocent children recognize the wrong of it.
Yes.
The wrong of not upholding the dignity of every human life is obvious to the innocent and to the young.
Yeah.
It's obvious to our hearts.
Yeah.
And
do you think that's why? I mean, I've seen recent years sort of the younger generations always sort of hold the pro-life movement in the United States. Do you think that's why? Because of that innocence, of that natural reaction?
I think so. I had a godchild once who, when she first learned, I think at the age of 8, of abortion, she said, "Oh, no one would, no mother, they would not do that. It's inconceivable."
Yeah.
And that's what the movement is about, is to make this unthinkable.
Yeah.
There are other ways to think of our dilemmas and our crises, of our needs and our fears, and to respond. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so much, I think it's unique, the fear that surrounds it, as far as the issue goes.
Yeah.
How do you find, I know prayer has to be sort of the thing that combats that first, but anyone entering into this ministry, do you have advice for how to keep the courage and how to keep the hope alive?
I think you have to stay close to God. But we had a holy priest who was a great figure in the pro-life movement, Monsignor William Smith. He was a moral theologian. And he said to us one Thanksgiving Day, when he was calling us to Thanksgiving, he said, "God is in the heaven, the Lamb is on the throne, and the victory has been won." And with that, he preached. That's what we believe. The victory has been won. We are simply, as Mother Teresa would say, we are simply a pencil in the hand of God. This movement is God's movement, and God will bring the victory. We need to stand in the stream of grace that he provides and do what we can to build a culture that recognizes the beauty of women, recognizes the goodness of life, gets up every morning, recognizing themselves as precious, that their life matters, that they were created and entrusted with a mission that no one else, now or in the future, will ever be able to accomplish. And if we are people who begin to believe the truth, these very truths, abortion will be a memory of the past, which we confine to the books.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's one.
It's one.
It's already one.
It's one.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Mother, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been so lovely.
It's been lovely. I thank you.
And we end all of our For Pete's Sake podcasts with our rapid fire round questions. Okay. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. Question number 1. Favorite Pope of all time?
I want the favorite Pope of all time to be Pope Leo the 14th.
Yes, absolutely. Our Pope. All right. And then an underrated saint in your opinion?
In my opinion, Saint Agnes. She was the saint who held the banner the day before Roe versus Wade. And I think we don't realize that she may have had something to do also with its failure.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Wonderful. We'll keep her in mind. And then most pro-life country in your opinion?
In my opinion, America. America. Yes.
They're keeping up the fight.
They're keeping up the fight.
Proud of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, and thank you again for coming on, Mother.
You're so welcome. It's been an honor and a privilege to be here.
Wonderful. It's touched my heart. It's going to be wonderful. I'm going to miss this very podcast. But finally, finish this sentence. For Pete's sake, I wish people would
love life.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you so much again.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
This has been For Pete's Sake. Join us next week for our next one, and we'll see you soon.